guys. You do know you're here for the wing panel, right? So before we get into it, who here has made wings before? Just to raise a hand. Awesome. Who is scared of wings? Cool. We're going to break down that. Shout out to the folks who made wings and are winging it. Love that. But let's go through just a quick intro. Hi, my name is Courtney. I go by Utopian Pigeon Cosplay. I like wings. I love wings. I've made over 30 wings of different styles, different techniques. I've actually probably remade this style of wing 10 times because it's for a character I've been doing for a very long time at a Renaissance fair. I like wings. That's why you can trust me, because I have messed up and I'm going to tell you how not to mess up. Or how to mess up and make it work for you, because sometimes that's how it goes. Welcome to the wing panel. Make yourself at home. So here's what to expect. We're going to start off talking about safety. Safety first, and we are starting with safety. The reason why is you only have one back. You might as well take care of it. You don't want to have scar tissue at your lower back like some people right here. Following up, we're going to go through materials. This is not all the materials you can use for wings. In fact, sitting out there, I was talking to my friend, and she was like, yeah, I did felt feathers. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. I thought of fabric felt. That's freaking brilliant. That's easy. You can airbrush that. Dang. So we'll be going through a lot of different materials so you can kind of figure out, oh, hey, this is what works, pros, cons, etc. Then we're going to go into planning. It's not going to be a long part, but we'll go into, here's the questions you need to consider when you're building your wings that you may not have thought of, like, where am I going to store them? How long could I wear them? How heavy can I wear them? What is my own personal stamina? We're going to go into that, along with an example of a project that I'll make eventually, because let's be honest, who has a long cosplay list that they're never going to make? Maybe, yeah, as it goes. So are you guys ready? Cool. My one request is please hold questions till the end, mostly because like a squirrel, I get distracted and then I have to start counting and it gets awkward. So bear with me, hold your questions, we will go through them. But let's start with safety. So yeah, safety first and mounts, because back injuries are no joke. So when it comes to wings, there's a lot of ways you can actually mount them. In fact, I brought some of my mounts that I have used. The classic, especially for wires, in fact, the one I'm wearing right here is a U-mount with a bracket. We will go into materials for what I am mounting with, the weight of the wire, things like that. But if you're doing a bigger build, you may want to do something like an aluminum bracket. And you're like, how do I even cut aluminum? Things like that. There are shops out there. There are STL files that you can download from Etsy. There's going to be a QR code at the end that you guys can scan, and you can go for all the people that I get my tutorials from. The folks that have been out there and also are a bit crazy, those things. But you'll see right here, in the upper right, that's actually a mount by Fairy Fancy Angela, the U shape. Now, the U is important. You do not want to do something that's like thin and down the middle for multiple reasons. One, much like corsets, you do not want any pressure directly on your spine. Spinal injuries can happen from wear and tear. This will still be against your back, but it distributes a lot better. Another thing is, it's a lot more stable. I'm not having to worry, are my wings straight? Actually, I might have to worry because I just did a lot of movement, but for the most part, this right here, super stable. Your U, wrapped up, you do not want raw wire against your skin, is a fantastic shape. And how I normally do it is I put it right to my sternum and like middle of my rib cage, each side. That's the easy way to figure out what your U is. And like I said, they're sturdy. Another thing is right there is a cutout aluminum plate. Some folks will do aluminum. It's lightweight. Your biggest battle when it comes to wings is weight. We're going to go through materials that are decently lightweight, some that are not, such as pipe, wood. Those aren't light, but sorry. Got a little lightheaded there. All right, we're coming back to it. But with aluminum, you can reach out to a couple different distributors who already have kits that you can use and then build upon. You can also find a local machinist that can cut out the aluminum for you. I don't recommend steel. Once more, we're fighting weight. But the thing is, now you have a plate, how are you going to mount it? This is just wood. Which by the way, afterwards, it's sturdy, it's not gonna break. Afterwards, you guys are more than welcome to play with this. This is 2 pieces of pipe connected to some wood, and then you may notice that there is a wrap around it. Because this is going directly against my back, and these wings are decently heavy, they are the blue ones that I'm gonna show you in a minute, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna have any cuts. Always wrap your back mounts. Some people don't with the aluminum, I still think you should. Because you don't wanna sweat and get cut, things like that, that's not fun, that ain't cool. Back in 2012, this was my first mount. As you can see, it's just PVC pipe. Actually goes for a set of cardboard wings, which are around here somewhere. I'll throw them on the floor and we'll go, oh God, don't do that to your wings. Just simple, once more, you. Once you have your back mount, and by the way, there may be other ways. You can see this one's not a U, it's a V. But because this is a square, we're strong and we're stable. But once you have your mount, how are you going to actually attach it to your body? Weight distribution. A very common thing specifically in the Renaissance fair fairies is corsets. I'm currently not stripping, but I'm wearing a corset. That is what's holding up my wings. The U actually goes down to about my belly button. That's how far it goes back down. When you are doing a corset, something you can do is wear Spanx or something underneath if you don't want it directly against your skin. Or even just like those underwear, the shaping underwear. You have to do a full body, you can just do shaping underwear up to here. Just to give you a little bit more protection, because once more, who wants scar tissue on your back? No one? Be cool? Awesome, glad. Because if you did, we need to sit down and have a talk, guys, okay? You're worth it. Now, if you're going to have something a bit heavier, this is actually my heaviest wing. It is with it spread out all the way, it's about 10 feet with both of them. And it is stupidly heavy, mostly because of the flowers. It may surprise you that flowers really do add up when you have this many. My harness for this goes over and across, and it actually has a wooden back plate, mostly because that's what we had at the shop, and that was free. So I took fabric, sewed it, and sealed it. But it is a wooden backplate and a modified backpack. There are also others that will literally use like camera harnesses, because camera harnesses are really good for holding weight for long periods of time. But you want to have a waist stay, or I think that might be the best term for it, something across your waist or something across your shoulders. If you're doing really light wings, in fact, if you saw me running around earlier with these guys, this was just tucked into my bra. I didn't even put on the shoulder mounts because I forgot to make shoulder mounts for them. So if they're light, you don't really have to worry, but when they're heavy, you need to plan it out and you need to test it. I actually have worn these around a apartment parking lot so many times my neighbors got concerned and started approaching me. When you have your wings before you get to a convention, you need to test your harness, and you need to make sure that it's not going to fall, it's not going to break, because you don't want to be at a con, and then these wings that you spent so long on, you crack them out because you didn't put them in right, stress test them, and you can never wear them again. One of these wings I could never repair, so I'm going to have to actually rebuild them. As you can see, they're a little awkward, but stress test, and always stress test before you paint and do everything else. You will have additional weight, but you don't want to spend all your time painting the ceiling and then go, oh no, it's going to crack and break. That ain't it. So common weight distribution things, harnesses, corsets, and if they're very light, you can either use an elastic around here or around your shoulders. And I said questions at the end, but are there any questions at this point? We'll talk a little bit more on the planning style. So when it comes to multiple wings, depending on what style of wings you're doing, if you're doing like a wire base, you can do them all in the same U-loop, and then you can mount them to wooden panel, aluminum panel, something like that. Depending on the weight, I would recommend a shoulder where it either does an X or around here. X's are a bit better for weight distribution, but it's also, if you got gals, not the most comfortable thing. Also, at the end, I can point you to a couple people directly. Crooked Feather is a great one. Oh, funny. Yeah, we will be getting to that because all these techniques, also for your hips and your arms. I did arm wings before. Same technique. Literally, the things I'm going to go over can be used for wings for your head. Now, when it comes to weight, if you're doing big old things, first off, don't. But no, it's a great way to think about wings for your head if they are big is specifically, I'm trying to think of, like, Arta Wigs is a great reference for Iron Wig. A lot of the supports in there, they'll actually do like Warbler, things like that, and then put it under the wig and then mount it. Think of it like, oh, here we go. Ponytails, fake ponytails and wigs. Look up those type of tutorials. Kinpatsu has a very good one that she did for a League of Legends character. That can kind of give you an internal mount because once more, you don't want to give yourself headaches or scars. I have a lot of scars, can you tell? Any other questions at this point?
There's one creator I follow on TikTok who I can't remember the name of right now, who makes like red hairstyle wings that are meant to go into corsets. Mm-hmm. They're basically just like one big U with like a wire.
Yeah. Actually, I can't hold this and the mic at the same time, so I'm going to project, and I apologize for anyone online. These guys so these right here are two U shapes, and when we talk about wires, we'll actually go a bit more into it because it's not single wire because they're 10-foot wings due to some scaling issues on my part, but all the wires are wrapped under here. It's very sturdy, so when it comes to fairy wings, like I said, make your stuff so they can last. I like wings, and I'm not that fragile. So this is usually the Renaissance style ones that are U-shaped, and not like the flapping ones or things like that. This is what you got.
That's the style I'm thinking about doing for my first hair, second haircut, really, of wigs for a Tinkerbell.
Oh, that'd be good. And we'll go into cellophane vinyl in a bit. This was actually part of my cellophane test. All right, any other questions at this point? Rock and roll, let's do it. So up next are types of wings and supports. And once more, it is always about weight and transport. We're going to talk about this more in the planning stage, but always remember how you're transporting these and how you're storing them when it comes to choosing your materials. The only reason I have this many wings here is because I live in Charlotte. So we're going to go through traditional, non-traditional, and materials on top. So here are, honestly, the first three are really your primary. Wood is something that people have done in the past, especially when folks were starting with articulated wings. Articulated means, you know, the movable ones. Not necessarily the flapping, but the ones that go whoop. But wire. I am a huge proponent of 9-gauge wire. 9-gauge wire is what is holding up these wings. It is very bendable because, by the way, or here we go. It is bendable, it is posable, it holds its shape, still has a little bit of bounce. If you don't want that bounce, you just add more 9-gauge wire, which you can twist or tape. Taping, I mean by like masking tape. You're going to have to use gaff or something fancy. Just literally tape it together because it doesn't have the torque to tear. It just becomes one wire. 11 gauge is better for lighter wings, even thinner gauge. By the way, 9 is thick, 11 is thinner. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's how it works. And specifically, the type of wire I'm talking about is not aluminum. It's steel. You find it in the picture hanging department of Home Depot. Don't know why, but that's where it is. You can also get off of Amazon. That's a screenshot of what we bought for the wing panel on Sunday. 50 feet will last you a pretty good long time until it's con crunch and you don't have it and Home Depot's closed because it's 1 in the morning. Been there. But in the past, I've also used wire hangers back in the day because I didn't know what I was doing and that's all I had. Wire hangers will also work if you have some really light wings, but they're going to be extra bouncy. Personally, I like bouncy wings. Makes you look like you're flying. Or maybe that you're twerking, I don't know. Now, pipes. Pipes are great when you're doing anything that's bigger or heavier. Like my first round of doing these wings, which as you can see, my last name's Armstrong and I'm struggling a little bit with this weight, was I did this with 9-gauge wire twisted. I did 3 9-gauge wires twisted and it was not heavy or strong enough. So I had to take it apart and then I put a gray irrigation pipe. Gray PVC, it is thinner than white, but it's stronger. Slightly heavier, so that's something to consider. The only reason you want to use this is if you're doing something that needs to be extra sturdy, or if you just can't find a white pipe thin enough. But white PVC is a bit more bendy. This guy has some bend, because you do not want something stiff enough that if you run into a wall, it breaks, because you're going to run into things. I think I smacked like 3 people just walking in here. So always make sure your materials have some sort of bend so they don't break or break someone else. Or you stand up wearing these wings and accidentally hit like a 9-year-old in the face and then give them all your flowers. Sorry about that, bud. But what this is the pipe goes down to here. I think I did a 90-degree joint. I epoxied it together. And then I ran wire for the rest of it. So once more, 9-gauge wire. Boop. Also in here, same gray pipe. In fact, by the way, this is the last time these wings will ever be put together because I'm tearing them apart, but they are old as all get out and have been beat up and still going. Gray pipe on the inside covered with foam, wood stapled in. I think I stapled it in? Yeah. Literally drilled through and I put 9-gauge wire through there and some screws to be able to form the base, which then has the wire that's holding up the PET-G. We will go into this type of technique in a little bit. So that is great pipe. I love you, man. The reason I am being rough with these costumes, one, I know they can take it, and that's why materials are important. Make sure your materials are sturdy enough so they can take the beating when you run into walls, trees, cars, kids, sometimes really tall people. Sorry, guys. And then aluminum. Aluminum is something that I am getting into, so I cannot speak on length, but I've done a lot of research on. A lot of the fancier wings that you see out there, specifically Fairy, will use aluminum along with some articulated ones because it is lightweight, it is bendable, and you could cut out designs like this and then not have to worry about wires because it is already supported. The issue, though, is, well, cost, learning curve and tools. So this is one of those I'm likely going to get a kit and play with. But if you are good at making vector files and you got a friend with a shop, go for it, bud. Some people also do aluminum plates, and they'll mix and match these materials, much like I did with my giant sunflower wings. I have pipe and wire. I was talking to someone on the Discord, and they did aluminum and PVC pipe because they wanted to break it down, so they did the aluminum, I believe, for their back plate in the starting part, covered it in fabric, and then did pipe for the extenders. Mix and match, but once more, like we talked in safety, you need a stress test. Now, wood over here is something that there's a lot of really good tutorials about doing articulation. You can switch it out for aluminum or wood, but it's something where if you want to do like dowel rods and all, they have to be strong enough. Once more, sturdy, bendable, but not breakable. And you can combine wood to give a little bit additional oomph, but you can also just do that with insulation foam. So if you're trying to do more 3D things, I knew someone who did that spray foam, the expanding spray foam, mix and match. But for your actual support, I'm always going to say 9-gauge wire, gray irrigation pipes, and if you're able to, aluminum. Let's go to the next slide. Now we're starting with the part that gets really fun and messy. Options for covering wings, this is the feathers section. So actual feathers, which I am currently wearing wings that have actual feathers, they can get expensive. There can be ethical concerns depending on how they're sourced. That is between you and yourself. But there are places that have ethical wings. But they look really natural. They're soft. They're relatively easily accessible. They're a bit fragile, though. You can do some repairs, but it ges messy. Sometimes you'll spend a lot of time steaming it, and you still never get those feathers to look as fluffy as when you first did them. Part of the issue, but that's also part of the beauty. However, the fun thing with feathers, specifically feathers, is they're a lot easier to make look like an actual bird's wing, because bird wings, first off, their right feathers and left feathers are different. They have multiple types of feathers on them, and then you can get all those feathers. You can also dye them. Not in this set, but I have another set where I custom dyed them and ombre'd them, things like that. You can airbrush. It still looks like a bird actually grew that somehow, because we definitely have yellow birds around here. These personally taken from Big Bird. But something that many cosplayers do is craft foam. Craft foam's fantastic. Craft foam, EVA foam, we're going to be interchangeably using those, just as a heads up. You can cricut them out, you can hand cut them out, you can templatize them, you can wire them, you can keep it real freaking simple. But you can also get those unnatural feathers. We're not getting dinosaurs over here with feathers that big that you can somehow ethically source or even get off of Amazon. But by gosh, by golly, you can cut out craft foam, put some wire in between them, and there you go. So craft foam, always a great resource. It just can be a bit more time consuming because instead of just individually prepping, like say these feathers by cutting and cleaning, you're now cutting, cleaning, making every single individual feather, which when we talk about planning, we'll get a bit more into. Fabric, felt, fabric, things like that. Once more, you can either do individual feathers or you can do like one piece and paint. Like these are fabric wings. So depending on how you want it to look, if you want it to look incredibly flat, these guys right here, you could just literally cut out and sew individual feathers or like felt. Just such a good idea, man. You can cut those out and then put them all together and assemble. Shipping foam, which I don't know the real name for it, but you guys know that foam that you use to wrap things, is also a common wing. I don't see it much in the cosplay community, but I see it at events. That's my main job is working events. So it's pretty easy, but it's incredibly fragile. So you get a really nice, kind of like organza, and you can do a lot with it. It's very cheap, but at the same time, you're going to be doing a lot of repairs. Let's go to the next slide. So now we're going to go into transparent. So these are, well, your clear wings. In fact, you can see up there, I have two examples that I currently have. I have not used cellophane until the last week. Been doing this for a long time, never had a reason to, but I wanted to make sure that I could explain to you key learnings. Got some key learnings, friends. First off, check your wires. So you have to rip through cellophane to wire one of the wings. I'm sure you can guess which one. You're doing great, buddy. But cellophane, pretty cheap. You stick it with heat and bond. There's a lot of colors available. I think you can also watercolor them. I'm pretty dang sure I've seen watercolor cellophane. I want to test that. I have not tested it yet, but with alcohol inks. The issue, though, is it's incredibly fragile. My first test, which were these guys. Oh, sorry. It's fragile, and I still threw it. We're doing great here. My first test, which were these guys, actually ripped through the first one. Cellophane is very thin. The heat and bond is the true structure of the transparent part. I used poster board, but when I talked to folks, they used craft foam, EVA foam, the thicker version. and it worked out perfectly fine, but once more wired, so these were hand cut, wired on the inside. I used Scotch tape, and then I laid down the cellophane, and I very carefully put the heat and bond on there, and then ironed it. I've also seen people do laminates. They threw a 5mm laminate to get pressure and heat on both sides. Most people like heat presses, but you can't put them on for too long because they will melt. Unless you're doing an apocalypse fairy, not quite the vibe. Whoop. Now vinyl I have not done, but it is something when I was actually specifically talking to someone in their group, because that design by Sunset Dragon's going around right now. That's actually my version of her wings. And all Sylveons have just been talking it up. It's been great. Highly recommend. What she did was actually take like the cricket vinyl and then painted EVA foam, wired it, U-shape yet again, and stuck that together. So she said it was very sturdy. I really want to try it, but I cannot speak to it. But essentially, if it sticks and it heats, give it a go. Why not? There's definitely tutorials out there. Now over here, but also, yeah, it is more expensive because if you've bought heat transfer vinyl, there are some cheaper ones out there, but for the most part, yeah, it gets pricey, especially if you're trying to go big. Organza and tulle fabric. So those wings in that picture were actually mounted to my arms. Once more, 9-gauge wire. I probably could have gotten away with 11, and to this day still kind of regret that, because 9-gauge, once more, is a little bit heavier, and weight is always the devil, but I was young. I could do it. Can't do it anymore, but that's okay. So when it comes to fabric, you can do things where you literally just sew shape. So if it's a dragon wing, it can be the fabric on the inside. You could do the fabric on the pipes. For fairy wings, you can do stretch tulle over a wire base. And you can paint it. It is very available. I know most of us probably have some sort of fabric stash. Most of us have some sort of fabric stash that we can play and mess with. But you can also make things not transparent if you want. So once more, don't forget about fabric as an option. It does not have to always be feathers or foam. Now, plastic and epoxy. This is definitely a learning curve. Epoxy is something that I kind of mentioned earlier when it came to the aluminum-based cuts. So you can literally cast epoxy resin wings very thinly. They're a bit more fragile, but they give you that really nice clear. That's one of those, you're like, wow, that looks like glass because, well, they made plastic wings like that. Well, something like this is, I never know if it's called PETG or PETG. Does anyone else know? Anyways, it's a type of plastic. This is literally plastic sheeting that's been wired, sanded, and alcohol painted. I've had these since like 2016 or 2017, and they still hold up really well. They're incredibly sturdy, but once more, you're dealing with weight. And what's the devil? Weight. So depending on what effect you're looking for, but this is also very good if you're trying to do any sort of moving wings that are going to have a lot of wear and tear, because you want something sturdy and strong that can take that wear and tear. Or you're just really good at foam work. Now we're getting to more of the misc stuff, because my friends, my comrades, anything can be a wing if you try hard enough. And sometimes you got that right out of college budget, so what you do is you go to a Goodwill and you find some old cardboard pieces, cut them out, and then you make yourself some flat wings like this with duct tape and glue. These are from 2013? Yeah, 2013. They were worn so much, and they are still going strong. In fact, the ridges of the cardboard only showed up about 3 years after finishing these wings. Don't sleep on cardboard. It gets treated a little more gently because of sentimental value. I love you, buddy. Fabric, on the other hand, there we go. Fabric you can have custom printed. So Sunset Dragon did this design. I had it custom printed and sewn. I thought we were doing 5-foot wings when it turns out it was a 5-foot wingspan. And that's why these are 10-foot wings. But they are very viable when it comes to large scale. You don't have to worry. Can I have this lightly, gently tap you? Cool. No harm. The only thing you have to worry about is the wire possibly poking someone. But you can do a lot of weird designs. You can hand paint them. We had a gal in our group hand paint hers. Fabric. It's great. Once more, everybody has it here for the most part. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say on fabric. You're doing great, buddy. Cotton. That is straight up cotton. Now, I am also making wings out of a minky fabric for an atlas moth. It's going to be about this scale. And another thing is, if you're printing fabric, we're not going to go into detail on this because it's not that panel. You can always get samples. So definitely get some samples, test it, and once more, remember weight.
Have you used Kellen for wings?
No, but I have seen people who have.
I was just wondering if you had.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't speak to it, but that kind of goes to the part when it comes to MISC of there's a lot of materials you can use. In fact, used to use street signs from political ads, just steal them and cut them up because you can wire them really easily. They're literally already wired. Yep.
Okay, this is very on brand actually. I have a friend who gets a lot of stuff, who specifically steals political signs, and they would like to make wings. How would you do that?
Cut them out. Now, you want to seal them. You can seal them with poster board. You can seal them with paint. Think of it like a prop because wings are props. Like, how are you transporting scale, all this that we're about to go into. So just literally think about it like a prop. How am I going to seal this foam? How am I going to seal this plastic? Same deal. Oh, yeah, sorry. Just started staring at you like a...
Have you gone over already, the construction of, how to mount the wings and wear them?
Yes, in the beginning.
Okay.
We can also talk one-on-one.
Okay.
And we're doing a Q&A proper in probably 10 minutes or so. So I got you. Because that's one of these things with all these materials, it once more goes to that part with pipe, wire, aluminum. They all go on top of it. Then you have your brackets in the back and your harnesses. So that's why we kind of started with how do you attach it to your body? How do you support it? And now we're putting how do we make it pretty? And another thing is craft foam. Once more, I'm bringing it up in this context because a lot of people think of feathers. The wings in that picture were 6 feet wide. You can get very large pieces of craft foam, wire them, and then make very good dragon wings, Moogle wings, any sort of wings that you want, weird shapes. My original Zapdos was craft foam on coat hangers. Just glue it on down with hot glue, and we called it a day. Other things to consider, once more, flowers, petals, cards. If it has a shape and can be glued, you can make wings out of it. Probably even like shoes. I bet you could cut up shoes and make wings out of it. That'd be weird, but you do you, boo. Other things, you don't always have to have them where they're mounted. I know most people here are probably like, I want to learn how to mount because then I can use my hands. There are stick wings. There are pulley wings. There are a lot of things that you can do with your hands. There are so many different wing options to still look like a bird or a moth or whatever you want to look like without it actually being wired, corseted, harnessed, or tucked into your bra if you have a bra or a really tight shirt. Another thing is something I'm not going to go into, but I have done a lot of research on, and also in my actual job, we use actuators and things in programming. Movement. And that's not just when it comes to how am I moving through space? Or does it bounce? But actually expanding the wings, contracting the wings, flapping the wings. Adafruit, fantastic resource. Tons of tutorials. In fact, in the QR code at the end, I have a link to an Adafruit tutorial I used to make my cellophane wings. I didn't even do the programming yet. I just used it to make the wings. But actuators, programming, there are plenty of resources out there. I can speak to it on some level, but I'm not going to do it at this point in time. Feel free to find me throughout the weekend and we can talk more. But you can make your wings flap. And once more, if they are flapping, now you have to start considering things like battery power, placement. What do you do if you need it to stop very suddenly because you're in a tight space? How are you mounting? If you're doing multiple wings, how quickly can you get those wings off? And remember, well, we'll go into that in the next section in planning, but you're going to have to pee at some point. So how fast do you get it off in either an emergency or to use the bathroom, which is kind of an emergency at times? Please consider that. Also, arms as mounts. If you know what a harpy is, which I think that's what she's dressed up as right there, I will level. I just Google search, so I cannot actually say who she is. I've been trying to give people credit that are not directly work that I've done. Your arms can be mounts too. You can tie things to your wrist. In fact, Bindo Gek a couple years ago did a chocobo, and she had wings literally on a string mounted to her arm. There are a lot of options outside of just these guys. So before we get into planning, any questions on materials at this point? Cool. So planning, what are you trying to make? So here's the questions that there's a reason this is on here because I actually have a notebook that I write this down on and I answer. How big do you want your wings? Do you want them to scale of the costume you're trying to recreate or imagine? Or do you want bigger or smaller? Because once more, bigger wings means it's harder to move around a space. I wore these 10-foot wings at Katsucon, and let me tell you, that was very, very hard. There were some angels in the crowd that literally held my wings and got me through. Same with these. I wore these at Katsu, and it was crab walk. You're just crab walking the whole time. Squats for days. What event or events are you planning on wearing them, and how are you transporting them? Some folks, they'll make a costume just for, like, cool, I'm just doing it for this event. I will only ever wear this at a Renaissance fair. I will only ever wear this at Cosplay America or Animazement or San Diego Comic-Con. Sometimes you're like, hey, we're going to be flying. I need to fit this in a suitcase. So once more, that's going to come back to your mount, your harness, and how you're breaking down your wing. Because remember, you don't have to have it as just one pipe. You can break it down into pipes. For wires, you can literally wire different sections of your wings, have hooks and snaps with a fabric interior to be able to break down even feathered wings. There are a lot of different ways you can break down wings, but that's something that you need to take the time before you even start building to draw out and figure out. Because you don't want to spend 20 hours on a set of wings and then go, I can't fit these in a suitcase. And that's where materials were like fabric come into play really well, because I can fold these and fit these in a suitcase. They're huge, and I could fly to Otakon with them. So consider where you are going, and if you're a person who travels a lot on planes or trains, make sure you plan your wings so you can actually transport them, and you're not just hugging them in your seat. And how long are you planning on planning them? Or how long are you planning on wearing them per time? Know your physical limits. There's nothing wrong with going, I can't wear a corset that long, because a lot of times I think of it as a corset versus the actual weight. These are going to be heavy. Cool, I can probably wear these for like 4 hours at a time. This is what goes back to your testing and stress testing, because you need to know how long you can wear them so you can have an exit plan or a break plan. Your health is important, don't discredit it. And also, do you want to do things like integrate lights or motion into the wings? That's another thing you need to put in the planning stage, because you can put lights in the wings, but are they going to be permanent? Can they be replaced? It's the same thing with a prop or with a costume. When it comes to stuff that burns out, how willing are you to tear apart your wings? How willing are you to tear apart your outfit? How willing are you to tear apart a prop? Think of wings like a prop, and you'll save yourself a lot of heartache. Then once more, like, what's your budget and timeline? You can answer that. But give yourself realistic guidelines. You're not going to be making these guys in, a day. In fact, this set right here probably took me about 2 weeks on evenings because I had to place every individual feather and cut it out. Give yourself time, it will take longer than you think. Then another thing is, how do you hide supports in the costume? Because I mentioned corsets and U-shapes and harnesses, but you can also literally build your costume as a harness. Even if it is a fancy dress, like if you're Sophie over there, sorry, you're just gonna be my example because you have a high collar, you could end up building an internal structure, kind of like they do with couture gowns, where they have just a secret corset, corselet, I believe, is what it's called. And then build that underneath, and then put it on top, make sure you have enough like fabric in between. So you just have a slit in the back, and you snap it down, call it a day. My primary Sunflower Fairy costume has a slit in the back with buttons on top, but I structured the inside with such strong enough interfacing that while I do have a corset support, for the lighter wings I could actually support it just with a tight t-shirt underneath and the overcoat. So if you have light enough wings, sometimes you can literally use your shirt or your blouse or your jacket as your harness. Once more, you're going to want to waist stay though, so you don't have crooked wings. Then once more, you have to use the bathroom. Now what? How quickly can you take off your wings? Can you do it by yourself? Are you willing to ask a stranger at Katsucon outside the bathroom, hey, can you shove this into my back? Figure out your limits. I know, it sounds weird. This is pretty easy to take off by myself, but for some of my wings, like this one, I literally looked at one of my friends. It's like, I need you to shove this into my corset as hard as you can. It's fine. I have protection. We're going to keep moving. I didn't mean to say it like that. Anyways, so you need to consider your comfort level with asking for help, who you're going with, and how you are attaching those wings, because you're going to have to take them off at some point. And sometimes you're going to get tired, have a headache, you can't get back to your room, you need to hide in a corner, you're going to want to take them off. So if you're doing we'll talk in a minute about those. But if you're doing something like the big wings here and these were very easy. I could just literally say there's a pin, a 9-gauge wire L that is through a hole right here. Do you mind taking that off and taking off the foam real quick? Cool, thanks. Just slid off, and then suddenly, I got a weapon. What materials are you comfortable working with is a great planning thing for any costume. It doesn't matter even with wings. Is it something you're willing to learn and to mess up with? And do you have the time to mess up with using those materials? Because anytime you're using a new material, you need to give yourself time to learn. Nobody is just going to pick up gold work and be like, I got it. Same thing with wings. You're not just going to pick up a hot glue gun and be like, bam, perfection. Give yourself time. And also understand your own personal workshop space, because if you're doing big wings, you need to be able to mount it somewhere. I actually used my bed for a long time. I would tie it to a bed, wire it up, and work on it that way. Now I can use a table. But I only had a very, very small room to work in, so figure out your space before you even start building. And then how and where can you store them? A question a lot of my friends will ask is, you got a lot of wings, but where? And they're all on my wall. I got wings in the closet. I got things like that. This goes back to transporting and traveling. If you think about how you can transport them, then you can think about how to store them, but don't build giant wings and then be like, cool, I guess they're going to be in the living room forever. Maybe you can fit them under your bed, but you need to consider that. And one thing I didn't put in with planning, but is very helpful, especially if you're doing individual foam feathers, is scale and size. We talked about scale, but now we're going to talk about paper drawings. Literally draw out your wings, especially if you're doing a large-scale individual feathered piece. You're patterning the wings. Get yourself some poster board, get yourself some just rolls of giant paper, get yourself tracing paper. Get yourself butcher's paper, whatever you need. Tape it out, draw it out, because then you can visually see it, and then not end up with 10-foot wide wings that you only wanted 6 feet for. And when it comes to foam, then you know exactly how many foam feathers, how long, because you created your own pattern. So with that, I'm going to give a quick example of a project I'll maybe one day do. And then we'll start doing Q&A. So here is an example project. One of my dreams is to make an adult Agatha. And I literally sat down like, how big do I want them? I want 5 feet. Because I think 5 feet wings are fun. It's not too big. You can fit through doors for the most part. And if you smack someone, you probably won't because you can at least reach out and do this when you're walking through a crowd. What event would I wear them at? Renaissance festivals, Cosam, and MagFest. Those are pretty much the only events I go to at this point. So, hi. 1 to 2. And how am I going to transport them? By car. Because it's on East Coast. Everything's on East Coast. I still am probably going to think about how I can fit these in a suitcase. But same time, because I want to figure out how to store them. How long am I planning on wearing them? I want these light enough so I can wear for about 7 hours at a time. I know my limits, and 7 hours is about the max. That's like top level. I've done 12 before, and it was awful. But about 7 hours. Do I want to integrate lights or motion? I do want to integrate motion, so I have been doing my research on that. But that also is going to change how I mount it. So I'm going to end up having to do a specific type of mount that goes into Adafruit feather wings which flap. And because they are going 5 feet, I'm going to have to be very careful because if they are moving, then they're going to smack someone, and that ain't it. No one wants to get smacked by a wing unless it's soft and fuzzy and you ask for permission. Consent's important. What's my budget? $150 in 2 years because I'm slow. You write it down, it's your budget, we're not going to go into it. Can I hide the supports in the costume? Harness with a back panel under a smock dress. So as you can see with this design, I would update this to be more of an adult because I don't really want to be a 13-year-old girl when I'm in my mid-30s. That is a personal comfort for me. So I'll end up doing probably boning into my dress and use that as the actual harness with an internal elastic on D-rings. So I'll just do that elastic, and then before I tighten up the dress, I at least have some sort of support, and I'll probably have a friend just be like, hey, can you just like hold this for a minute and then tighten up my, thanks, like that. Literally, that'll be the conversation. If I have to use the bathroom, now what? My goal is to do pin releases, so I can easily remove them if I'm doing movement. Pin releases are just a pin that goes into a pipe that disconnects. You take out that pin, boom, slide it right off. What materials am I comfy working with? I'm going to test with cellophane and aluminum and fabric and wire, maybe epoxy. This is one of those, it's such an early planning stage, I can't say, so you just write down everything you want to do because then you can double check against your budget and go from there. And how am I going to store them? Once more, on the wall or folded. They are going to be 5-foot wings, so I have to find 5 feet of room or 10 feet of room. 5 feet under a bed, maybe. So that's just kind of an example of the questions that you want to ask because you're going to solve a lot of problems before you even start working on it. Now we get to the really fun part. Oh, Q&A. Now whip out your phones and scan that QR code. You don't have to, by the way. You do, you boo. What that QR code is, I made a quick Google Doc with the people that I follow and research, such as the Crooked Feather, Fancy Fairy Angela, Adafruit tutorials, a couple really good YouTube videos. There is so much knowledge out there that this is a great start for figuring out where you can make something. We live in a day and age, especially with cosplay being so big now, heck yeah, where there's someone out there that took the time to make sure that you don't make the mistakes they did, like using coat hangers and then having to tear apart your wings and remake them. So make sure you give them a check out. Crooked Feathers Patreon, 100% worth it. Fancy Fairy Angela, same deal. They are worth those $2 a month, man. They gotta pay their bills too. So let's hop into it with Q&A. Do you have a project that you want to work on? Do you have questions? We're just gonna wrap up probably next couple minutes with questions. If not, we're gonna start talking about your multi-feather project. So let's hop in with you first, Ren.
So how do you go about like
that's a fair cop. So sometimes it's one of those, if you're doing a corset, you literally just put it into the corset, like slide it in. This guy can slide right out. So I have it between a piece of fabric that is underneath my corset and the corset, and just went to a friend and said, hey, shove this in here. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. If it comes to something like pardon me, friend. If it comes to something like a harness, with this one, I would partially get into the parts of my costume that I could get on, and then I would put this on. And I'm going to project without the microphone, so bear with me. So I end up putting this on. I do the elastic around the back, and I would tighten it with a D-ring. You do not want to use something that does not stretch, because you're a human, you move. You do not want to do something where it's like, okay, this is a non-stretchy ribbon or something. You can use that as an extra support, but you want elastic. So for this, I would go through. If I'm doing it alone, I wrap it in the front and I bring it around to the back. If I have over pieces, after I do my waist, I switch it to the front, and then I usually find someone to help me finish putting on the rest of my costume. And the last thing to go on are the wings, because you want to be able to take them off. So thus they should be easy to put on. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. D-rings and a base. Any other questions before we hop into doing multiple wings? What you got?
So I'm rethinking, I don't know if you know overlord, but
Yeah.
wings, when they go like out of the hip.
Yeah.
And then straight down and curve the front of her. For that kind of harness, I'm gonna talk about the harness that I did the first time, because
You have to.
that.
Yeah.
But for my second go around, would you recommend like a sturdy harness up in the back,
Yes.
even though most of the weight is centered like right near the elbow?
So when I've done things coming out of my hips, I have a microphone. When I do things coming out of my hips, what I'll do is I have a support up here, but I'll also do thigh supports if the costume allows. So you'll have elastic here in a very stiff fabric, specifically. Sometimes with a wire in it, like you can put some like 9 gauge to give it a little bit more bend if you want to, but I don't really recommend that because it hurt. But like a very stiff fabric, even a leather there. So you have support here and here. If you're able to get something over your shoulders, I know some people can, but a lot of these like costumes, say Morgana, they'll actually integrate it into their bunny suit. And once more, boning and corsets are just a secret of so many wings, but you can still do like an elastic harness with a very stable back. If you do it enough where you can either snap, by the way, giant snaps are sturdier than you think. They're great, highly recommend, especially for armor. But doing like an elastic D-ring and some snaps in the back so it doesn't slide would probably be your best bet. If you're able to have additional support, I do like having it there because then I can do things with my thighs versus literally going like, and be able to influence them. Mm-hmm. You and I are just talking one-on-one after. All right, we got 2 more questions. You're up next. Mm-hmm. So are you talking about like a pulley system, or are you talking about something like magic wings? Fishing line on your finger. That's the secret. Some people also do very thin wire if you want something a little more stiff, because the thing with fishing line is you're still going to have that issue where it comes to it has to follow versus it's going to get pulled. Because you're pulling and it's coming like this, but you may want it like this. Does that make sense? So yeah, using a very thin aluminum is fine, but also there are thin steel because steel doesn't bend as much as aluminum that you can use. Fishing line though, same thing if you ever have a deep V, magic floating ladies. It's fishing line and little U-hooks. And final question. Otherwise, just find me at the con. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I hope you build your own wings and smack people in the face, and I appreciate you coming to the panel.